Welcome to Undoing I Do with Stephanie and a Day. I'm Stephanie Hunnell, the owner of the Hunnell Law Group in Asbury Park, New Jersey.
And I am Adelola Sherilyn Dow, the owner of the law offices of Adelola Sherilyn Dow in Staten Island, New York. Hey, Stephanie.
Hey, how are you? Good
Hi.
afternoon.
Good afternoon, good evening. It's getting dark.
I know. I know. I have to have all these bright lights on now because it's so dark already.
It's not fair. The summer went by too quickly, and it's actually like nippy outside now.
Hmm.
We're both
And
in our offices.
we are. Yep. I had to put on closed-toed shoes today. No more
Yep,
flip-flops.
yep. I turned the heat on yesterday. I was not
Yeah.
happy
Oh,
about
did
that.
you? Oh, that'll be
But we're
that'll be next.
here.
Yes, we are. Today is our seventh episode. Did you know that?
Hercules, Hercules. Oh goodness, you know what? That was quick.
It was quick. It was really quick.
Oh
It's
my
been a great
goodness.
time. I've had so much fun doing this.
So have I. And you know what? So many people have been like, have said, wow, you guys really just give so much information and you like what you're doing. And we can tell that you like what you're doing. Somebody said that to me yesterday. I was on a telephone call with them. And I
Uh,
thought that was such a great compliment.
I do too. That is a great compliment.
Yeah. And it's true. We like giving people some of the nitty gritties of
Hmm.
how matrimonial and family law works so that you all can actually be better consumers of legal services if you need to partake in those services.
Yep. Yep. And I really do. I hope that everything that we're saying gives value. And I think when we come on to like last week, I was a little bit like riled up at the beginning, but that's real life. That's how it is. That's how it is.
No,
And
it's
by the
fine.
way, as riled up as I was, I still love what I'm doing.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. As riled up as we could get and as tired as we could get,
Yes.
we still like what we do. And thankfully, that's a blessing to really enjoy ultimately what you do, because it really, even though it can be, cumbersome sometimes, at the end of the day, we're both really happy to serve people and help
Yes.
people. And that's what really matters.
Yep. Agree.
So today we are going to be talking about how you spend your money on your youngins.
Yes.
Private school, college, all of
Yeah.
those big ticket expenses as your
Uh,
children return to the campuses or to a virtual station near you.
yep. It's this last couple of weeks that everything on Facebook is all the back to school pictures, and there's also your adult kids that are going to college, and you want to know how you're going to pay for that, and do you still have to pay child support? So
Yes.
how does it work in New York with college?
Yeah. So now I feel like a bad parent because I didn't get that back to school picture and I don't know what to do. I was thinking that maybe I should just dress my child up in her uniform and pretend like it's the first day. I don't know. That was a week ago and I still feel bad about it. I'm gonna figure it out because I gotta get my good mommy star. So
She's going to survive just fine without a picture.
my daughter, she'd be like, "This is not my first date. What are we doing?"
You could just have her have a sign, day 21.
Oh God. But anyway, so we're talking about New York and how New York allows you to spend your money on higher education. So let's talk about college first, right? Even though we're going to talk about private school, let's talk about college first. First of all, there is no presumption that children who are from intact families are entitled to college expenses being paid. And so we don't have in New York, at least I haven't seen any of these cases that we've seen in New Jersey where a child just goes and files for college tuition, in an intact family. And I think a lot of New York attorneys were shocked when we were seeing our brothers and sister lawyers across the water dealing with these issues. So that's number one. But if you are in a family that has been dissolved by divorce, or you were never married, either party can sue for the other party to contribute to college expenses, and the child can sue for the contribution to college expenses. And generally, those expenses would cover tuition, room and board, books, fees, and equipment. All right. That doesn't mean that a court has to order all of those things, but those are all of the things that somebody can look for. All right. Now, I've often had people say to me, "Oh, but what about buying a car to get back and forth to school?" And that really isn't something that happens in the average case in the state of New York. Perhaps Jersey might be different because I seem to remember some cases that I've done in New Jersey where people were asking for cars and so on and so
Some
forth.
travel
Expenses, right? Now, in New York, you will come up against something called a SUNY cap. So, SUNY is our state university system. Okay, so any public state school is a SUNY school. And then you have in the city of New York, CUNY schools, which are City of New York colleges. All right. And those could be primary colleges or secondary schools, secondary colleges, so 2-year or 4-year schools. But you never really come up with the CUNY cap, even though CUNY is usually cheaper. Nobody ever talks about a CUNY cap unless they are a litigant trying to get a cheaper tuition for their for their obligation. And the SUNY caps differ based upon the school that is selected. So let's say a judge says, okay, you're going to pay SUNY cap. It's going to be SUNY cap in state, not SUNY cap out of state. SUNY cap out of state will get you to pay more for the school that your child is going to. SUNY cap in state will get you to pay lower. Generally, judges are going to say that you're going to pay at the SUNY cap, depending upon the school. Again, they might say SUNY Albany, which will have different tuition than SUNY Farmingdale, which will have different tuition than SUNY Binghamton, right? Or they'll tell you that you have to pay the out of state. But I will tell you, I've hardly ever seen out of state tuition rates be entered by a court in the state of New York. At least not on any cases that I've been doing.
How does the court determine which cap to use? So is it based on where the people live that they're going to use Albany, or how do they determine which cap?
No, it's not. It's actually not based upon where they live. Isn't that strange? Because these caps are all based on case law. There's really no rubric for a judge determining the school. So you'll have some judges who have a proclivity for doing SUNY Albany, right?
Okay.
And then you'll have others who, if you're on Long Island, you might have a judge that says, it's SUNY Farmingdale.
So it's kind of the luck of the draw.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so if you have a child who's going to NYU, right, in the state of New York, you're probably going to be capped at one of the SUNY schools. So if SUNY in-state tuition, including room and board, so on and so forth, is $20,000 total, but yet the child is going to NYU and the tuition is $60,000 a year, well, the pot that we're talking about is going to be the $20,000 pot. How the child is going to pay for anything after that is really going to be between the child and the institution, or the custodial parent and the institution and the child. New York is hardly ever going to force someone who can't pay to take out loans to pay. As a matter of fact, last year in January, I had a client who hired me because his child's mother was suing for college tuition in the family court, Richmond County Family Court. And we appeared before a support magistrate who has since retired. And when we started the trial, the support magistrate noted that the mother was intending to pay for her portion of the tuition with loans. Mm-hmm. And so as we go into the trial, I start questioning my client about how he would be able to pay, and we put in his financial disclosure affidavit. And he said, well, if I have to, the only way I can get this is a loan. And the judge starts looking at the figures, and she says, well, where is the child supposed to be going? And she says, well, we're going to stop this trial right now. I can't force anybody to take loans out to pay for this tuition. And it's obvious madam, that you want to take out loans. It's obvious to me, sir, that the only way you can pay this is to take out loans, and I can't force either one of you to do that. Case dismissed.
Oh,
Yep. Case got dismissed. And so the good thing is that if people really can't afford this extremely onerous financial burden, then you're not going to be in a situation where you're going to be forced to take out another $500 a month loan and pay for tuition.
right.
And that's a good thing. Now, with respect to whether you still have to pay child support, because that was one of the things that you just mentioned on our intro. Yes, you still have to pay child support if your child is going to college. And if your child is not going to college and the child is under 21, yes, you still have to pay child support, unless there's some craziness that occurs, such as constructive emancipation or something like that. Or of course, if the child is self-supporting, right? Mm-hmm. But if you have a child who's in college and you're paying college tuition, yes, you still have a child support obligation. Yes, the Support Standards Act, the Child Support Standards Act still applies. But if you're paying room and board as a part of that college contribution, you can ask the court, or if you're not in court and you're negotiating for a future college expense, you can ask for a credit against your basic child support for however much you pay for room and board. So let's say that your child, so let's say that you have one child and the child support obligation is $1,000 a month and you pay $300 towards room and board per month, then your child support obligation can be adjusted downward because to $700, because remember that child support is supposed to pay for the child's share of the roof expenses in the custodial parent's house. And you can't be made to pay roof expenses over here at SUNY Oneonta and pay roof expenses back in Staten Island where the child lives for the months of the year that he or she is not boarding at school.
Yeah.
And that would be financial suicide for most people.
Yeah. Frankly, I mean, I have a strong aversion to anybody having to pay for their kids' college.
I know we talked about that. We had a whole discussion about this on Facebook in another group. Yes. It was lively.
It was a very lively discussion. And me personally, my personal opinion, and look, I've taken cases on both sides, and I can advocate both sides of the fence on this effectively. But my personal opinion is I don't really think that the state should be obligating parents to have to pay for college. And in New Jersey, unlike New York, where they're looking at your ability to pay and they're saying, we're dismissing this case because we're not going to make you take out loans. They have no authority to do that. I've seen the opposite in New Jersey. I've seen judges that just look at your income and say, here's your percentage, here's how we're dividing college costs. But I want to backtrack because I actually have a couple of college cases going on right now simply because of the time of year. Yeah. But the original case that permitted the college contribution says, and I want to read this because it just drives me insane. It says, in general, financially capable parents should contribute to the higher education of children who are qualified students. Yeah. There's nothing in there that says you have to, you must, you shall. It says should, and it says financially capable parent. So that's the starting point. It really wasn't a directive or a mandate that, college has to be paid. But over the years and through all of the case law, it essentially has become a presumption or an expectation that if you're a financially capable parent, you are going to pay for college.
Right, and you're reading from Newberg, right? Newberg versus Arrigo.
Yes, I'm reading from the Newberg case. And in that case, by the way, they also made the suggestion or opinion that you would even have to potentially pay for law school.
Yeah, it's crazy. So basically, people, your kid is big, bad, and grown. Mm-hmm. They are a full-fledged adult. Yep. They could do adult things. They could drink. They could smoke cigarettes. They could do whatever they want to do. And they're 25 and you sitting up there paying for college?
Yes,
Are we serious right now? Not college. No. Grad
school. Yep. Grad school.
First of all, Steph, you know that you and I are on the same page with respect to this presumption.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like I should have to pay anything. Suppose your kid just isn't the nicest person and they just are disrespectful. They don't value anything that you have to say. They do not take your input. They sit there, they eat your food, they rob you of your money, and now you got to pay for college too. And everybody knows, because y'all's probably seen my child if you've been watching Undo and I Do. She makes pop-in visits and she threatened to do it today. Y'all know I am so much in love with my children. But I'm not in the category of thinking that I need to risk my own retirement and things like, because let's face it, if your children are starting college, you're probably closer to retirement, right? Than people who just had babies yesterday. And
Right.
So most likely. And so why is it again that I have to spend $30,000 of the money that I need to probably save so that I can retire comfortably to pay the college tuition of somebody who has more time than I do?
And by the way, it's not even because you mentioned if your child is being bad or they're disrespectful or all that. But what if you just want to make sure that your child is taught a lesson on how to financially manage their money and be financially responsible human beings?
Right. Which is a tenet in my family that we like to deal. Like my daughter will say, we tell her, like, if it don't make money, then it don't make sense. Like, there's all these little, right? And Lele will be like, yeah, if it don't make money, I'm not spending my money on that. No, you can spend your money. She's like, no, that's not that important. How much is it? No. So if I'm teaching my child to be like that and to be circumspect about how they spend their money, then why should I have to completely ignore those values and have it foisted upon me that I'm going to pay X, Y, Z?
You're going to pay. And by the way, that's only in the event that you're separated or divorced or never married and you have to come to court and make those things. Because you're not forcing a married couple to make that same decision about, forcing that married couple to make those college payments.
There's definitely a constitutional issue there that somebody needs to take up, because I just want to see the fight.
I know. I want the right case to come in my door because I want that.
Exactly. Yeah, because there's an equal protection issue, and it's not right. And certainly in the state of New Jersey, right, which you're going to talk about, but certainly in the state of New Jersey where people might have to take out loans.
Yeah.
I now have to take on debt to pay for stuff, so I couldn't afford it in the first place. Now here's the thing, right? So there's something that I don't understand, and I always tell my clients, you really don't have to take out this loan, because there's some people who will volunteer to take out the loan because they don't want their kids to be saddled with the loans and so on and so forth. And I'm like, but you can't afford to spend $60,000 a year for your child to go to this school. Why is it that you feel so guilty that you have to extend this lifestyle to your child? Because again, going to certain of these elite schools, or just schools that are just downright expensive, because some of these schools are not even elite and they have no business charging people $50,000 and $60,000.
The times have changed where education used to be a lot more reasonable. The prices of education, once they started doing, this is just my opinion again, once they started doing the federal guaranteed loans, well, now colleges realize that they could bump up the tuition, and then they have these loans that are going to be covered and guaranteed by the government. So why aren't they doing this? So then, of course, the tuitions start going up and up and up and up and up. They're not going down. So you have these outrageous tuitions that you have to pay. And I say have to pay because sometimes you really have to pay them. And parents are taking out these loans. And again, I go back to agreeing with you. If you're not even older, parent, you could be in your 40s or 50s, you're in a less, you have to save for your retirement. So your child is in a better position at the age of 20 to pay for that, pay down that loan over time. Look, have your child take out the loan, help them with the interest while they're in school or something like that. And
Sure.
then they're not, having the interest compounded on the student loans and all of that, but they're really in a better position to pay that obligation.
Sure.
And
Or if you
frankly, then they're invested in their education.
That's right. Because I remember, I don't know whether you had this same experience, but so I went to Wagner College on Staten Island and still am so in love with that campus. It was voted most beautiful by US News and World Reports at some point, and I was just it's such a gorgeous campus. But we spent some this chick, there wasn't no we, because my mom shout out to my mom who does, why she don't be looking at I'm gonna have to deal with that again. Cause again, Mom, Stephanie done had her family folk looking at the daggone show, and I don't see you on here once. But anyway.
She's calling you out.
But anyway, my mom was a single mom, and she was an educator, but she didn't make more than $40 some odd thousand at the time that I was going to school, back in the late 90s. And she didn't get any financial aid, right? Or I didn't get any financial aid because she made too much money. $46,000. I mean, I know that, we have inflation and everything like that, but even in the 90s, that was not that much money.
Right.
And so I think I had one Pell Grant, but that was only because it wasn't really a Pell Grant. It was just that the money came through Pell. It was an educational grant, but that was only for my first semester. And then everything after that was loans, and I had 3 jobs. So I took out loans, and then I still had to pay for books. So my mom helped me with books because they were $800 a semester back then.
Yeah, they were still expensive back then.
20 something years ago, $800. And I was an English major. Like, these weren't a whole bunch of science books. I only took a few science classes. Anyway, and so my mom gave me $1,200 my last semester because I had to take 21 credits my last semester. And so my mom gave me $1,200, but my entire tuition bill at the end of those 4 years was $96,000. And so perhaps I'm blessed because I don't even know. I think that to go to my school right now would be 200 and some odd thousand at the end of 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And I might be being modest. I might be being modest, but
well, my undergrad, I was lucky. I went to state college. So the tuition wasn't terrible. I don't remember how much it was, but I did get some financial aid and some grants, but most of it was loans, which I rolled over then when I went to law school. So I grew up in California, and I went to undergrad at Cal State Long Beach, which is also a beautiful campus. I loved it there. But then when I moved to New Jersey to go to law school, because in-state tuition in New Jersey was cheaper than California by a lot. So, but still, I had student loans of 6 figures of student loans after all said and done, which I'm still paying for today. I haven't been in college since 2004.
Girl, I graduated with 6 figures, and thankfully I had 3 loans when I graduated, and I paid off 2 of them. And so I still have 1 loan left. But I graduated a damn long time ago.
I know.
I graduated from undergraduate 20 years ago, or maybe it was 19 years ago. Something like that. It was a long time ago. Yes, it was 2001. That was 19 years ago. And so these kids, but I'm paying them, so it is what it is, it is what it is. But, and my mom now has the bomb, pension. She got a great pension. She has, annuities and everything. She also works, but she don't have to. She works because, why not kind of thing. But, she made sure that she was set up, which is great because I still benefit from that because I don't have to support my mom, right? She'll be 70 years old next year, and I don't have to worry about how is she going to support herself. And I will say my mom co-signed on 2 of the 2 loans that she co-signed on were the loans that I paid off. I made sure that I paid those loans off.
Yep.
But you know that some of these children these days leave their kids with the cosign.
Huh?
I mean, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal a few years ago where this woman had to go back to work. She was a librarian, and that's
Her
actually
kid
what my
left
mom
her
does
with
by
the
trade.
student loan.
Yeah,
right?
her child just defaulted and was like, "Deuces, mom. Guess you got to figure that out."
Yep.
What? Who?
And just imagine, like with your 6-figure loan, my 6-figure loan, my dad is now 85.
Mm-hmm.
He would still have that loan because I still have that loan. So if he took out everything that I took out,
Right, unacceptable.
absolutely unacceptable. Their house, I mean, they're doing fine. But
Right.
if they were saddled with this 6-figure loan still, 20 years after I've graduated, 16 years after I graduated law school, that'd be crazy.
No. That would be crazy. And kids these days, like, you know, when we say 6 figures, people, we're probably talking about loans with a 1 in front of them. These kids today, I mean, I had a client whose child went to law school, and this girl had almost $400,000 worth of loans. That is a curse word. Yeah. $400,000. You know, so like my loans are now way back to 5 figures since I was able to pay off those first 2. But I can't imagine graduating. You're 20 something. You're supposed to be on and popping, trying to live your life, dipping and doing. And you got a house payment and you don't even have a house.
Yep. What? Yeah. I mean, this is totally off topic. I do think that our system needs to be revamped the way that college tuition it works.
Well, you know, I can't disagree with you. My mom has the undergraduate degree and 2 master's degree and never knew a word of a daggone loan. She, you know, I think my college credits when I went were $535 a credit, and when my mom went, the credit was 70 some odd dollars. So she was able to go to work and pay. I think her undergraduate was completely free, but her master's was 70 something credit, and she was able to go to work and pay.
Yeah, that's not possible now. Even, you know, frankly, even with, you know, the community colleges, you know, you can go to the community college and then that would be fine. Like that's the extent of it. You transfer to another university, you're even going to and starting a community college, you can't work your way through and pay for tuition unless you have already a career, like something established.
Right, exactly.
What you have until you're finished with college.
Yeah, it's just amazing. And so, you know, it's great that New York has that, you know, that kind of, for lack of a better term, that kind of fail safe, whereby at least you're not going to be saddled with all of these obligations. So long as you're coming to the court and you're correct about your finances. Like, we're not talking about people who are doing dubious and, you know, stuff. And they really do have the money, but they're trying to show like they don't. You know, in that situation, the court's like, we don't believe you, so go take the loan. Go ahead. You know, but when you have the ordinary person who really can't afford it, at least New York has that kind of fail-safe. New Jersey is a whole nother topic, though.
New Jersey, in New Jersey, there's 12 factors plus 1 catch-all factor that says any other factor that the court wants to consider when determining whether or not there's college. And one of the factors is the party's ability to pay. So that's just like one piece of the puzzle, whether you have the ability to pay. The court's also looking at the child's aptitude. What would you do if you were an intact family? They're looking at all of these factors and weighing them all against each other. So you get a mixed bag of things depending on the judge that you get. Some judges that are going to force you to pay based on your percentage of income. You're going to have some judges that are going to talk and look at what asset structures you have, make you tap into your savings accounts in order to do that. Now, they're not going to necessarily make you tap into your 401k, but they can say, well, you have this access to money potentially, so we're going to kind of fictitiously make up a percentage based on your, you know, these resources that you have. You know, it's kind of a crazy thing that they'll do in New Jersey. If you have a house with equity, they're going to look at that house that you have with equity and say, oh, well, you know, instead of having that equity in your house, you can take out some of that money and be able to finance college. And it really depends on the judge. And frankly, not a lot of people are going to be challenging this, even though the rule is that you're supposed to have a plenary hearing and a trial to make that determination.
Right.
It becomes so expensive that a lot of times people are just resolving it in advance. And if it goes to trial and the judge is making you pay, there's not really any more resources in order for you to appeal these cases. So you end up coming up with like this mix depending on what part of the state you're at, depending on even in the same courthouse. You might have one decision from one judge that's very similar in fact, and you're paying, and then in front of another judge, they're not going to make you pay because they're going to look at your expenses and your financial statement and say, really, your resources are limited. I mean, and it's a hard argument to make to say that your resources are limited.
Yeah.
I've had in New Jersey a couple of cases where people are really modest earners, mid earners, $50,000 to $75,000 a year, and that has been enough for people to have to pay for college. One of the things that the courts are also supposed to consider is whether or not you have other children, whether those other children are going to go to college. But really, they look at this in isolation. At least that's been my personal experience, is that the court and the judges look at your case in isolation for your child currently. Can you afford for that child to go to college, despite the fact that you now have another child that's 3 years down the road that's going to have to go to college? Well, now you have no means to save for the other child. What are we going to do with that child? So I mean, that's something that the case law says you're supposed to consider, but in reality and in practice, I don't really see that being the case.
I agree with you. Having had to litigate cases for contribution to college in both states, I would completely agree with you that I've seen judges on the papers and with only oral argument do these analyses and come up with and have people tap their retirement benefits in order to pay, as though that's just a regular bag of money. Meanwhile, these people are, under 59 and a half. And so, with the COVID exceptions being put to the side, right? Because we don't have these issues now necessarily, but have to take this money out and pay ordinary income taxes and the penalty.
Right. And by the way, you're not getting a credit for that penalty. They're just saying you're taking $50,000 out.
Right.
Yeah.
No, nobody cares that you have to pay the penalty.
Oh, and by the way, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was saying, and by the way, just like New York, you're also paying child support on top of the college contribution. Right. Because just because you're paying college expenses doesn't alleviate you of the obligation to still continue to pay child support.
So how does New Jersey do the child support calculation when kids are away at school?
So in New Jersey, the child support guidelines after the age of 18 are not supposed to apply. There's, I think it's like Appendix A that says that child support guidelines are no longer applicable for children over the age of 18. The reality is that you may use them if the child is living at home. So the judge can still continue to use them. And then if the child is away at college, it becomes discretionary for the judge to continue to use them if they wanted to. What I've seen is the judges looking at I've seen it a couple of different ways. I've seen the judges looking at the number of days the child is home. They're taking the third fixed expenses that are supposed to be for the living expenses at home. And they're saying, okay, we're taking that amount and we're going to divide it by the number of days that the child's actually there. So you kind of artificially reduce it. I've seen them take that part away completely and just give the other portion of child support.
Okay.
I was a nerd and I was reading my book about it because I was looking for a case that gives you any kind of clear-cut guidance of how you're supposed to do the child support.
I don't think there is one.
There's not one that I could find.
Yeah.
There isn't one that I could find. So it is definitely where they say it's discretionary, and you just look at these percentages and you kind of decide what seems to be fair. Now, as I say that, the one thing that they do say as far as the statute goes is you're supposed to consider all of the child support factors when determining how much how much child support they're supposed
Right.
to be.
Right.
And they're supposed to have the child actually complete a case information statement to determine what the child's expenses are and how to determine what child support should be.
Yeah. So I've never had that happen.
One time I've had that happen. Once.
Yeah, I've never had that happen.
What I've been practicing 16 years now. So once in my entire 16 years. Did I have a judge that said, okay, we want to see this.
And do you remember as a law clerk having that happen? Because
Never.
I don't remember having that happen as a law clerk.
Nope, my judge never did that.
For the people who don't know, a law clerk is the judge's personal attorney, and both Stephanie and I have had the elite opportunity to serve.
Yes, that was one of the greatest experiences. I was actually just emailing with my judge yesterday. We're talking about it.
You know what? It's so great that you have that opportunity because my judge has passed away.
I know. And wonderful.
No matter how hard that man was, like he never made me cry, Judge. You never made me cry. You made some people cry, not me. And not Jessica Major.
But, it was rough. But in retrospect, like he did things his way, and I actually liked him, and I knew what to expect when I was before him.
Yeah. I think about my judge very often and hope that he is resting in perfect peace. He was an awesome mentor. And he was actually a really great guy as well, and great dad. So, yeah, but I never had that occur where a child had to give in their own CIS. That didn't
one time
happen.
Yeah. So when we're talking about college, also I want to say that it's very difficult in New Jersey to overcome this presumption that you're required to pay for college. If you have a property settlement agreement, a lot of people included in the property settlement agreement saying that there's a requirement. If that's the case, then the court is not even required to consider the Newberg factors. They're just required to consider how much you're going to consider.
Right. And some people actually come up with percentages in their MSAs or their PSAs, whatever you want to call them, property settlement agreement or marital settlement agreement, or in New York, your stipulations of settlement. And I can never understand that, because if the child is, far from going to college, why are you coming up with percentages? You don't know in 10 years what the incomes are going to be.
Nope. Unless the child is already in high school, they're going to be going to college soon, and you just want to avoid having to go through this again. That's the only time I recommend putting in percentages, and even then, it should be qualified. We're going to use this percentage, provided our incomes and assets haven't changed.
That's right.
And because you want to keep the door open for the ability to negotiate. What if people lose their jobs, especially now? Look what's going on right now.
Right? Can you imagine?
Are unemployed.
Can you imagine if somebody's lost his or her job and they still have to pay all of this tuition? I'm tearing up. I have a little allergy action going on.
Oh, so no.
Forgive me. Forgive me. I hope I mess up my makeup. Y'all know I want to look good for the camera. But yeah, if you were laid off during COVID, I just spoke to a gentleman the other day who is in the middle of a divorce, and he's like, and I just got notice that my job is going to be no more on September 30th. Mm. How does this, so people, before you make the decision and you're like, oh, I just want it to be easy. Before you make the decision, really think about this. None of us know what tomorrow brings.
Right.
We have no idea. So, it needs to be that you are providing a document that will allow for some kind of flexibility in the event that you really cannot afford to do whatever you've agreed to do. And sometimes, we'll have people who say we'll address this at the time when the situation is actually right, when the child is actually going to college.
Yeah, and then we have to exchange the financial information. We try to work that into the year or so before you're exchanging the financial information and making those determinations. I frankly think that's the best way to handle it. So you're not making a determination in advance.
I agree with you.
I have tried to put in language that we're going to consider it based on the Newberg factors. I've always run into an issue where the other side wants to definitely define that there is going to be a college contribution. Which I don't really understand, because you're obligating your client for something you don't even know that your client is going to have the ability to pay in the future.
Right. And unless they're independently wealthy,
Mhm.
and even if they are independently wealthy, we still, once again, you don't know
Yeah,
what ends up happening, and suppose that person has some kind of injury, and the injury has caused them to have to live off of whatever that wealth source was, and now it's depleted, and
right,
it's 10 years later, and little Christina is ready to go to college, and that money, it just isn't flowing like it did 10 years ago.
right. Yeah.
Now what? I I shudder to think at what would happen to somebody in that situation.
Mhm. And
And
by the way, the courts our marching orders for the courts are to enforce the property settlement agreement
that's
unless
right.
it's patently unfair. There's like very few ways to
That's
modify a
right.
divorce property settlement
That's right.
agreement.
That's
So
right.
that's their marching orders originally. So their original position is we're enforcing this. The two of you agreed to this, and this is what you thought was best.
That's
And
right.
so you have a hurdle to overcome, which you don't necessarily have to have.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And you know what? Um, you can't then say, "Oh, well, this is unfair now." Okay, well, because a lot of judges will say, "Listen, you becoming disabled was foreseeable. It's
Right.
foreseeable that at some point somebody might become disabled.
Yep.
That's
Foreseeable that you
foreseeable.
would lose your job. Yep.
Yeah, it's foreseeable because most people these days don't stay at a job, until they retire."
Right. It's also then, at least in New Jersey, I'm not sure if the same applies in New York, but in New Jersey, you also have the hurdle of whether that change is temporary change.
Correct. Same
Is
thing in
that
New York.
change? Yeah, I've had, somebody's not working, and it used to be more difficult. I don't know that it's as difficult anymore. I think people and judges are, kind of moved with the times. But before, if you lost your job, you had to come to court with like 100 applications,
Yeah.
proof that you've
Yes.
applied to like another 100 jobs,
You're
in
right.
order for the judge to even look at your case and say, I'm going to consider reducing your support obligations, college
That's right.
included,
That's
child
right.
for college alimony, all that. But yeah, you used to have, I remember I've had to put those packages together. And I used to
Yeah.
have clients that came in. I'm like, no, 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 you have way more homework to do. We're
That's
not
right.
filing this based after 2 months of unemployment.
That's absolutely right. It has to be an actual change of circumstances, not a temporary change of circumstances, right? You losing your job and you've been out of work for 4 months and you've applied to one job a week, that's not going to cut it.
Right. Yep.
That's not going to cut it. It's not going to be, that
Yep.
easy at all.
And so you mentioned early on that, these are adult children that we're now having to support. You were like you might be 25 years old and you're still paying for college. What happens? Like, is there any obligation in New York for the child to provide the parents with their grades?
With their grades,
Mm-hmm.
there's not an obligation, but there is case law that says if the child is just outright failing, right, that would be a basis for you to try to vacate the obligation to pay. But there's no obligation on the child's part to provide um uh their transcripts. But if mom or dad says, wait, Johnny is completely sitting up here failing basket weaving, um if they find that out, and of course you can subpoena
Right.
the records, and that way you can say, see, I told you Johnny was really failing and he has F's on all of these courses. Why am I paying? Why is he at Stanford and I'm paying $70,000 a year, for this kid to go to Stanford? By the way, speaking about $70,000 a year, is there any kind of cap in the state of New Jersey with respect to tuition?
No, there's no cap. There's
So
no
your
cap.
child could literally decide that they want to go to Harvard with no financial aid.
Right. Right. I mean, they could make that decision, and it's going to depend on the judge. So there's no bright, like you said, you had the SUNY cap.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist in New Jersey. I've seen judges that say where they're going to use Rutgers as a baseline to say what is an appropriate level of tuition. But if this child is going to Harvard and the parents have a higher ability to pay, the judge is going to order the parents to cover a percentage. That they are going to require that the child apply for financial aid and take out whatever financial aid is available to offset the cost. Then the difference between the two, they're going to look to the parents to take out a loan or do whatever they need to do.
So I have a question. So what is considered to be financial aid? Because so in a lot of our settlement agreements, we say first the child has to exhaust all financial aid. And again, a lot of my adversaries say, "Oh no, Dow, we don't want to put in loans. We only want to put in grants, and we only want to put in scholarships." I'm telling them to put in loans.
Yep, absolutely.
Because that's a type of financial aid.
It is a type of financial aid. They're getting the federal guaranteed loan, so they have to take out loans, look for scholarships, look for grants, work study. I also include work study in there.
What? Johnny got to work?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You done said another curse word again.
Another W curse word.
Woo!
This one's way less painful than last time. But yeah, I mean, the one way, like there's a few cases that I've seen where if the child is refusing to provide grades, the court is going to look at in New Jersey whether or not they are academically capable. And that really is like a 2.0. They're not you don't have to have, A pluses and Bs and stuff.
Right.
But, so that's going to be one of the factors. It's not going to be the death knell necessarily. And I've seen judges that said, okay, well, they're not doing great now, but we're going to give you another semester or two. Come back again if they're still not doing well. Then I'll reconsider whether or not we're going to emancipate this child and not make you pay for college. But if the child is actively refusing to provide any information to either parent about college, then you can make the argument that that child is beyond your sphere of influence.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then they should be considered emancipated. Because that's like the key term when you're talking about whether or not you have an obligation to pay for your child.
Yes.
Your child beyond your sphere of influence. And that just means, like, are they still taking your direction? If they're just completely ignoring you, they're telling you, like, I don't care what you say. And they're adults, so they don't have an obligation to provide you the grade. But they make it an obligation based on if you want to get your
right. It's an obligation based on your desire to have the entitlement.
Correct.
Right.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Did you see the time?
Yeah, we have talked for a long time, child.
We didn't even talk about private school.
We could talk. I tell you, we end up saying, "Oh, we don't know if we have a lot to talk about," and then we have a whole hour or something to talk about.
I know. Crazy. Should we cut it here? What do you want to do?
Yeah, we're gonna wrap it up for the evening. Yeah. But everybody should tune in next week for another episode of Undoing I Do with Stephanie and Ade.
Thank you for joining us. See you next week.
Bye. See you next week.